The Nile River system was pretty much 12,500 years ago the way that it is today. The big difference was that the Sahara Desert was green and fertile.
When you look at the Temple of the Sphinx, you're dealing with thousands of years of water erosion.
Yes. What Robert Schoch is saying, and what his evidence clearly demonstrates, is that we're looking at what's called precipitation-induced weathering that was caused by exposure to about 1,000 years of extremely heavy rainfall.
And the last time there was water like that in the Nile Valley was when?
The last time you had the water erosion like that in the Nile Valley was precisely during the Younger Dryas.
Can this really be true? If there is evidence of rain erosion on the Sphinx and the last time it happened was almost 12,000 years ago, then Mr. Graham Hancock is right when he says,
and it's why we cannot sensibly accept the insistence of Egyptologists that the Sphinx is just 4,500 years old.
Graham further agrees that in 2500 BC, the ancient Egyptians were there. But according to him, they found the Sphinx. By then, the monument was buried in the sand up to its neck. It had been already heavily eroded.
And that they then recarved its head into the head of a pharaoh.
This would actually explain why the head of the Sphinx is so drastically disproportionate to its body. The ancient Egyptians either didn't know she even had a body, or they didn't want to dig it out of the sand. Graham theorizes it could have originally been a giant lion's head. So how did mainstream archaeology react to these claims? Well, when Robert Schoch and John Anthony West first proposed the theory that the Sphinx was 12,000 years old, the response of Egyptology was,
"Oh, rubbish. The Sphinx can't possibly be 12,000 years old because there's no other megalithic monument anywhere in the world that's anywhere like 12,000 years old."
But guess what? That argument was obliterated by the discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Oh, and if you want to know more about Göbekli Tepe, be sure to subscribe because that video is coming up soon. And in case you have no idea what Göbekli Tepe is, here is a short summary.
Göbekli Tepe, 11,600 years old, a giant megalithic site. My goodness, if you can make Göbekli Tepe, you can make the Sphinx.
Obviously, the discovery of the temple, which is considered the oldest megalithic monument known to man, gives huge credibility to the theory presented by Schoch and West. Joe Rogan, of course, got his mind blown. And like most of us who know nothing about erosion or geology, he finds this stuff fascinating.
When you look at it through his descriptions and his understanding of the various levels of stone, how some of it is harder, and this is the reason why some of it is eroded less.
Okay, Joe, we get it. But let's hear what the experts have to say. Mr. Hancock explains that you can see the erosion most clearly in the trench surrounding the Sphinx.
Deep vertical fissures are classic precipitation-induced weathering, classic weathering produced by rainfall.
As for the reason we don't see it on the Sphinx, he says that the monument had been restored repeatedly. Some of the stones we now see there were placed during the Old Kingdom. Supposedly, that was the time the Egyptologists say the Sphinx was made. But then, in true Joe Rogan style, he comes back with an intriguing question.
How old do you think that actual civilization was? Like, how far back?
And this is why I love Rogan. As stoned as he often is, he really immerses himself in the topic, and always finds interesting questions to ask. If we say that the Sphinx was eroded by rain over 12,000 years ago, that means it could have been built hundreds, if not thousands of years before that. Hancock believes it could be even 20,000 years before that, but that's just guessing at this point. Then he proceeds to go down another rabbit hole. The thing is, mainstream archaeology thinks humans were hunter-gatherers at the peak of the last ice age. Then something changes. We learn agriculture, start creating villages and cities, and develop a social hierarchy. There was a king or a pharaoh who had an army, and he could make the people do it. As hunter-gatherers who barely survived the day, no one ever woke up and thought,
"Hey, let's build a huge stone monument."
Even if he did, he'd probably be stoned to death. All joking aside, once Göbekli Tepe was discovered, apparently mainstream archaeologists just said something like,
"Would you look at that? It seems hunter-gatherers actually could build huge monuments."
But to me, it still doesn't make sense. Hancock continues to explain that even in the modern world, we still coexist with hunter-gatherer tribes. It was recently proven that there are still tribes deep in the Amazon who never had any contact with civilization. And it took us only 6,000 years to go from punching signs on clay tablets to having computers and airplanes and going to space. So basically, there was enough time in 20,000 years for a civilization to rise and destroy itself. I personally believe that there were advanced civilizations before us. I think they had advanced knowledge like astronomy and mathematics. I don't think we got it from aliens or gods. It was just us, maybe evolving a bit differently. What do you think? Is Graham Hancock right? Or are the two of them just old stoners who fantasize about crazy stuff? Let me know in the comments below and keep a lookout for our next video on Göbekli Tepe and other amazing finds, as we continue taking bites out of history, just to see what it is made of. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.